Commissioners, it's been a year since we engaged in Century 2. Again, we appreciate the board's support of that infrastructure replacement program. We committed to you at the time to keep you well informed of the progress we're making, and that's what Julie Childers is going to do today in her first report.
Good afternoon. Today I'd like to report on our metrics for Century 2 and Phase 10. And as you recall, during the 5-year plan, we set a lot of goals for asset replacements in all 4 utilities. And I'd like to report out on how we achieved those goals this year. Just kind of a brief overview of where we ended up at the 5-year plan. There were 2 utilities, wastewater and gas, in which we recognized that our current levels of replacement on our assets were sufficient. And wastewater was at 25 miles per year, and gas was the 8 miles per year on the cast iron and ductile iron pipe. For the other 2 utilities, we recognized the need to accelerate replacement programs in those 2 utilities, and that's what the rate increases were for. Under electric, the main things we wanted to address were substations, poles, and underground cable. For water, the main things we wanted to address were galvanized main and cast iron main replacements. So we're going to go through each utility individually and talk about the goals in a little bit more detail, explain what we were able to achieve this year, and look at the current year's fiscal goals as well. For wastewater, we have 3 main goals. Of course, the 25 miles per year is a goal that's been in effect for some time and will continue into the future. The second goal is to make sure that the projects that were required by EPA are actually completed on time. We have 2 main bundles of projects. Our Phase 1 projects, the last one is due in June of 2013, and there were 125 projects on that list. The second bundle is due in June of 2016, and there are 8 projects on that list. Our third goal is to upgrade the 2 wastewater treatment plants that were identified during our studies as needing upgrades, and that was at Kauai and Fourth Creek. Now we'll take a look at how we've done on those goals. These charts are going to be repeated several times for the different utilities. That has the same format for each. Beginning on the left, this is what we're calling a historical level of replacement. And when I say historical, I'm talking about just the last 3 to 5 years, not going way back in history. The next bar will show what our fiscal 12 goal was for last year. Then what we were able to achieve versus what's the goal for next year. Now as we go through the wastewater and the gas slides, you'll see that 3 bars are the same. Historical, fiscal 12, and fiscal 13 are the same. That's because we did not accelerate in this particular utility. For this goal, we were able to exceed it this year, doing close to 29 miles, and that keeps us slightly ahead of our average of 25 miles per year. For the next main goal is how are we doing towards completing all of our EPA required projects. This chart represents, if you look at each basin, for example, in First Creek, we had 23 required projects in First Creek. And as you go down, you can see we have roughly 20 projects each in each of the main basins and slightly less on the smaller basins. What this represents is the blue bars represent the number of projects that have been completed. So for example, on First Creek, we had about 22 projects out of the total of 23. The last project shown in yellow there is under construction right now. So as you can see, we just have a handful of projects under our first bundle that are due in June of next year that are under construction. If you look at our Phase 2 projects, they're much less numerous. They're shown here. Some of those are shown in blue, which means they're already completed. The reason we did some of those is because they were located very near our Phase 1 projects, and we just extended into those areas to be able to cover those at the same time. We have a couple in design and some that are in construction, so we feel confident that we'll be able to meet our deadlines, both on the Phase 1 and the Phase 2 bundles on our EPA required projects.
On Fourth Creek, we've got a completed and a design. Is that on Phase 2? Can you explain that to me?
We had basically 2 projects that were identified in Fourth Creek to be done during the Phase 2, but one of them we've already completed. We have a second project that's in the design phase. Any other questions on that?
Well, looking at that, we assume that we will complete all of those unfinished projects by June 2013.
That's right. We will. Yes, we will. Okay, the last goal on wastewater was to do the required upgrades on our treatment plants. Kawaki Phase 1 is a $6 million project. It's well underway right now, and it's due to be complete by December of this year. And it is on schedule to be completed by that time. The Phase 1 improvements at Fourth Creek have just gotten underway. That's a $17 million project, and that's due in December of the following year. There are Phase 2 improvements that are required by the EPA at both of these plants, and those will be undertaken in the time period between 2016 and 2021, which is when the consent decree ends. Well, I've seen this budget chart before, but basically it just gives an overview from the beginning of the consent decree all the way to the end. It shows that in the beginning, we had a lot of effort towards planning and storage tanks. We just finished our last storage tank, the last of 6 last year. The orange bars represent the Phase 1 of our treatment plant upgrades. Then we go over to our second phase of treatment plant upgrades here. Beginning in the current year, fiscal 13, we're leveling out with the blue and green bars, which are rehab and our pump station sustainable level going forwards. That represents our 25 miles on the sewer replacement, as well as a 20-year lifespan that we expect on our pump station. So we expect that level to continue on even past the consent decree. We'll move on to gas. The main goals on gas were to continue with our cast iron ductile iron replacement program, which is funded at $5 million a year. It's been that way for the last several years, so that we can accomplish the goal of removing all of that type of pipe from our system by the year 2015. The second major goal is to make sure we meet the regulatory requirements of the Distribution Integrity Management Program, also known as DIMP. The main requirement of that program is that we know our system, and we do that through a combination of making sure we have proper inspection and documentation of our assets, and then continue to evaluate our system and make prioritized upgrades as we go forward. Here's another example of how we were able to meet and actually exceed our goal this year on the cast iron and ductile iron replacement program. Historically, we've been at 8 miles. Last year's goal was 8. This coming year's goal is 8. Last year we were able to do close to 10 miles on the cast iron and ductile iron. This is the first of several charts you'll see where we have a specific type of asset that we plan to remove from the system within a fairly short period of time. You'll see this as well on galvanized main and also on our XLP underground cable. But what it shows is we started back in 1980 around 160 miles. Right now we're down to around 30, and we should be able to achieve our goal of being finished with this by 2015. Okay, we're going to move on to electric. We had 3 main goals within the electric system. One was to upgrade substations that were identified in our 2008 comprehensive study. Also focusing on our overhead facilities. We talked in the 5-year plan about focusing a lot of effort on our transmission and distribution poles, the 69 kV poles, mainly due to the age and the criticality of that asset. Overall, we expect to double the rate of pole replacement from 1,300 going to 2,600. For underground distribution cable, the XLP type, we have been doing around 7 miles a year, and that's going to be doubled to 14. So let's start with our substation graph. Now this is where you're going to be able to see a difference between historical levels and fiscal 12 and 13 goals. It was not the case on wastewater and gas because those were staying level. But looking at historically, we spent something around $7 million or less on substations. Last year our goal was about 9.5. I will mention that as we go forward looking at these charts, the fiscal 12 goal is going to be slightly less than the fiscal 13 because we didn't have a whole year with a rate increase in place. So you will see a difference between the fiscal 12 and fiscal 13 goal. But we're able to meet this goal. The goal for the coming year is somewhat higher. Although we do already know that one of the new substations that we'd originally planned to start on this year is going to be scheduled out for another year. And that was near University Hospital in the Cherokee Trail area. That's mainly due to the slower pace of growth on the UT development at Cherokee Pond. On our poles, you can see a big jump, basically doubling the rate. Historically, we've been at 13. The goal from this year going forward is 2,600. Last year, our prorated goal was 2,300, but we were able to exceed that level considerably through a lot of effort of our overhead construction crews. So we've got a good start on that goal and are continuing at that pace for the coming year. For our XLP underground cable, that's another one that we are doubling our rate on for fiscal 13. Our goal last year was 12.5 miles, and we were able to do 17.5 miles. One reason that we went up so much on that is there are, on this particular type of cable, there are failures that occur in neighborhoods, and when that does, it is more efficient for us to go in and replace that cable rather than attempting to repair it. So sometimes these are done on close to an emergency type basis. This is another chart which shows an asset that we're moving from our system within a fairly short period of time, beginning with over 180 miles several years ago, and now we're at about 110, but we are rapidly removing that from our system